Welcome to Hey Mumma. This is episode 2 and I am joined by Jess Jasch today. Welcome.
Hi, thank you.
And you are an empowerment coach and an embodiment facilitator. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about exactly what that title is?
Yes, I can. It's a bit of a catch-all title because I call it, I have a few like tools in my kit that I draw upon to bring that to life in my work, but it's never just one specific thing. So I actually started in the corporate world, in corporate communications more or less, and then while I was there, I started teaching yoga. So I did my training and taught yoga. So yoga was my first embodiment modality as such.
Okay.
But since then, I've added different tools. There's specific meditations that I've trained in and that I deliver that's very nervous system and trauma-informed side of meditation, as well as different modalities of coaching too. So I always felt like it was important to take the tools, but also bring intention behind them in using them, rather than just going, oh, I teach yoga, it's, or, oh yeah, I coach. It's like, well, what's the intention of generally speaking, but still specific enough to go, this is the direction that I want people to, like, this is what you come to me if you want to start to create more of this feeling in your life. But it could be from any kind of different background. Like I work with corporates and executives, or military, or emergency services, so there's a broad spectrum of who, but it's the intentionality behind the embodiment, using embodiment tools to regulate the nervous system, along with empowerment practices and communication as well. So I bring that into my work too. So
awesome.
Yeah, there's no quick way of explaining it.
What I love about that is the intention side of things and the communication side of things. So obviously, Hey Mumma is pretty clear that we're talking to mamas out there, but not excluding women that are not mamas either. This podcast can be for them as well, because you are not a mama as yet, just yet. But I think all empowerment to women, and also getting back to that intention and communication. So when we do decide, we're going to do yoga, or we're going to do meditation for our mind and for mamas to relax and all that kind of thing, it is important to think about the intention on why I'm doing this, and then also what's the outcome, like what is it going to get me. And you talk about leading. Yeah, leading. So for me, I thought it was very important for you to come onto this show, because mamas are the first leaders, right? So you work with CEOs, you work with corporate, all that kind of thing, and
their
military
and their mothers.
So the thing is, at the core level is mums are the first ever leaders. So you, from a tiny baby, you are leading by example. You are communicating. You are the first communicators with babies. So it's so important to start for mums to learn how to lead, lead with heart.
Well, like we've had this conversation, like off recording before several times about, and with my work also, that like when I talk about leadership, it's not explicitly or exclusively saying, you have to be at this level of, corporate or executive C-suite level, or you have to be this rank, or you have to be this, or you have to be that. It really is recognizing that we lead ourselves first, and we lead by example. And as mamas, or even as mother figures, because like you said, I'm not a mother yet, but I've been an auntie since I was 16. And they're like, I don't even want to say the number without sitting and counting, because I have so many nieces and nephews, and then step nieces and nephews, so there's just...
You played that important role in their life as well.
It's a guidance, it's a leadership role in a different way. And while that parental, and there are people that, who are aunties, but or aunties or uncles, but they play the role of parents. Like they're the main caregivers, so or
helping,
grandparents or whoever, so it's it's really this position and recognizing that we are leaders no matter what the title is.
Yes.
And I think that's really important, and that's really important for me when I share any of my work is to kind of bring that inclusivity in, because so many people seem to dismiss their not even their potential, that sounds like cliche almost, but like their possibilities or their role. They dismiss their role because they're like, oh, well, you know, like, for example, it could be like, oh, I'm quote unquote just a stay-at-home mum.
Yeah,
oh, I'm
100.
just this, I'm just that. It's like, oh, I don't even work. I don't even know where I would fit back into the workforce. It's like, that doesn't mean anything. Like, in terms of leadership, like, you're still a leader, and
you are a leader of a family.
But we also lead ourselves too, which is the first part of leadership. It's because with leading, we can't, the way that I see leadership, and I feel like, and I've learned leadership, and you know in the professional sense, I surround myself with people who are doing similar work, and who are coaches or who are leaders or whoever, who are doing it this way as well. It's a different paradigm of leadership to what we have known. You know, like the leaders aren't necessarily the bosses. Yeah, they're not necessarily the bosses. They're not necessarily the politicians. They're not necessarily the things, or, you know, like, we are doing leadership in this more embodied way, which is where the embodiment comes in, which is leading ourselves first, which is practicing and doing the inner work, and, you know, self-regulating and learning how to self-regulate and gaining, and, you know, it's not even doing it perfectly. It's just practicing these things, gaining a sense of emotional awareness by starting with ourselves first and going, oh, you know, like, whether it's you step into a container or you get guidance from someone, or, you know, like, or however you find your way to it, to find a safe way to, or a safe place to practice that emotional awareness in particular. It's this leading ourselves by practicing this awareness of the fact that we have emotions that show up, and how do we regulate them, and how do we manage them, and how do we communicate through them, rather than just sort of not looking at them and staying stuck, but then trying to lead. And I think that's the old leadership model is, and we see it in the world today a lot, on, like, in the public sense, is leaders who are trying to tell people what to do, but aren't clearly are not doing the work themselves.
That's right.
And not even trying to practice emotional intelligence. You know, like, there's this...
Because they tell themselves, I don't have to, because I've got a team to lead.
Yeah, I'm already in the role.
Yeah.
So I don't need to. I just get to tell people. But that's not true leadership. So true leadership is self-led first. And
100.
And, you know, practicing the inner work, not about, again... It's not about being perfect. It's not about doing it perfectly all the time. Like, we're going to mess up, and that's normal. Like, I mess up all the time too, but it's how do we recover from that? How do we lead ourselves through, like, the little waves of life as they happen? And then that's what we teach. Like you said the word perfectly. That's what we teach by modeling.
Yes.
So as parents, or as caregivers, or as aunties or uncles, or whoever, you know, like, or, you know, friends
Raising
who are aunties and uncles. Yeah, like, you know, the village, as the village.
Yes, I love the word the village.
I
call where I live right now the village.
Yeah, I have goosies as I said it. Like, you know, as the village.
Let's get back to that.
We are modeling that by doing that. And that's a lot more powerful than what we say or tell children or other humans, people in our professional care, people, you know, who are, like, in an organization, who are, like, who we are managing or leading, whatever context. It is way more powerful to lead by doing and by modeling than to lead by telling.
Yeah, because actions speak louder than words.
Yes.
Big motto for me, just in life experience and stuff, because you can tell someone something, but then you can do something completely different, and they're only going to react or model that or vibrate the same as the way that you're actioning.
It's like if someone's doing something and enough people are doing something, like littering, right? Let's keep it really silly. If enough people are like, oh, we just leave our rubbish around, like in a schoolyard, then it's like, well, everyone's doing it, so I may as well. Like, it's okay.
Yeah, exactly. And that, you know, like you're talking about from the top, like politicians and schools and leadership, and in that area, if someone is saying, pick up your rubbish and put it in the bin, but then you're going around and you're seeing people just
they
living
don't
it there
understand
anyway.
why, because
they don't understand why, and I'm big on this with my children, is that I may seem like I babble a little bit longer when I am trying to teach my kids something, but I like to tell them and communicate with them and say, this is why I'm asking you to pick your towel up off the floor in your room.
Help them understand, because children's and I really want to talk about this too, because children's brains are still developing. Like our prefrontal cortex, which is reasoning, decision making, emotional regulation, all of the most developed part of the brain as far as like human evolution, right? That doesn't fully develop until we're 25 or so. So like to expect children to be able to reason for themselves, like, you know, we teach them how by modeling, but to expect them to do that without teaching them how.
Yeah, teaching them reasons and why. Why is a big one.
Like, you know, it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
But
and they'll switch off too. So if they think, oh, mum's just nagging, mum's just lecturing, like how annoying. And I've even had my 12-year-old girl tell me, oh, I think you guys are annoying sometimes. And I love that.
But how great is it she can say that, though? She can articulate it.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing as parents too, and what I see in mamas, and I remember seeing this in my sister especially, like, because I was, you know, young when she was the one who made me an auntie, basically, like, you know.
How many years difference?
6 years.
Yeah.
And so I'm the youngest, just for clarification.
Yeah, sure.
But like, I remember seeing in her and in other like women around me who were parents, always seeing like that sacrifice and the, but my needs are not as important as the children's, and I'm not even going to try and step into the debate around that, because I don't know. But like, you know, I don't know the practice of it, but I want to hear it in a moment. But but in the essence of how we model, isn't it more important to model to our children, hey, I have needs, or I'm having an emotional experience or reaction to something, and I'm communicating it because I've practiced how to as a modeling, versus...
That's just my coffee machine.
Yeah, that's okay. There's ghosts in the apartment. But like, isn't it more powerful to teach them it's okay to have an emotional experience or reaction, and then articulate it and take space and talk it through, or, you know, whatever, by doing it from your own and going, hey, mum is just like, you know what, honey, I feel like I'm having an emotional reaction. You can even use those words.
I feel sad. I'm feeling a little bit anxious.
I feel a little like reactive about, you know, the conversation that we had before, or the thing that happened. Yeah. So I'm just going to, you know, take some quiet time and breathe. I'm still here for you. So, you know, like I'm still here. I'm still present. But
this is what's happening
for me right now, just so you know. And they can go, oh, okay. Doesn't that teach them, especially as they grow into adults, that they are allowed to have needs and have emotional reactions?
Yes, they're allowed to be upset. They're allowed to take a moment.
And this is generationally, like, you know, so this is people doing the best they can with what they know. But I never really grew up knowing that it was okay to have emotional reactions, even if they were different to what was happening, especially with my elders, right? So isn't it, so, you know, that's a lot of work I've done through my 20s of recognizing that, and they go, oh, how do I undo this? Oh, okay, right, how do I relearn this? Like, and I'm in my 30s now.
Exactly.
So it's like,
how do we teach them from a young age to be better than us? Because ultimately, when we become parents, what we want for our children, or even as an auntie or guardian, how can we make them better than us?
How can we give them the tools as we learn and know more, especially scientifically and neurologically speaking as well? And by neurologically, I don't mean just the brain. I mean the whole nervous system, because that's like, you know, that's through the whole body. But how, like, you know, we learn more as, you know, years go on, because science and all of that, like, we have this understanding. So of course we understand more, or if we're given the opportunity at least to understand more than maybe our parents did. Yes. So we get to do things differently, and there's so much more permission given, especially for our children then. So to say, hey, it is okay that you have an emotional reaction. We can't tell them how to emotionally regulate by telling them how to emotionally regulate.
This is true.
We co-regulate as parents or caregivers, right? Like, so we co-regulate by teaching them and by keeping ourselves in that regulated practice state, right? We keep
100%,
saying the word practice,
yeah.
but we keep practicing and self-regulation, and that's how we help co-regulate with our children when they are in heightened experience. We go, okay, come here. We put, like, with permission, we put our hands, like, on their back, or hold them close, or, like on the heart, or wherever it is, or even anchor it in, squeezing arms and legs, and go, like, breathe. Let's breathe together.
Helping them work out what is regulation for them.
Yes.
Because I've been listening to an audiobook at the moment about that, is that my regulation will be different to their regulation.
Yes.
So even just being and allowing them to be okay, like telling them, giving that permission, like you said, giving that permission to tell them that it's okay to feel that way right now.
And in that example as well, if they turn around and go, actually, I don't want to be touched right now. That's okay. It's like, great. What do you need?
Yes. What do you need? Yeah.
Like,
I love that.
Do you see, like, there's such this funnel of, you start here and you practice and you ask questions, but because you're modeling and showing them, they are over time more able to articulate that.
Yes. So when they get to 25, they have been led and guided in a trusting, loving, supportive space. That then by the age of 25, when they have developed that emotional intelligence, that they will be able to gauge that and be aware of that faster, and they can do it on their own. But at the moment, they can't.
And hopefully without the pressure of needing to be perfect, because maybe they think that their parents are perfect, because it's like, well, their parents never showed emotion, so they obviously didn't have these experiences, and I'm having all of these experiences. Oh my God, how am I surviving?
Yeah. This isn't normal, so I'll hide away.
Wrong. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'm doing human wrong.
Yeah.
I grew up like that, and it wasn't until, what you're talking about, 30s now, where I'm like going, well, no, I'm not doing human wrong.
I'm being human. Isn't it a fun time?
Yeah. and I love, I just wanted to point this out before I ask you the next question, but you have dipped already into my next question, which I love, because the conversation is just flowing without questions. Is, one thing that I've learnt, that if I'm not feeling okay and I'm trying to regulate and something's happening with me and my kids say to me, are you okay, mummy? I say sometimes, no, I'm not. And I think that is so important and powerful, because then when I say to them, are you okay, honey? They can actually feel safe to say, no, I'm not, mama. Like, can you, what do you need?
And it's also really powerful that they can ask that too, because, like, children, by their very nature, because there are caregivers of children, they are dependents. Like, they automatically, when they're caregivers, or like when they're elders, or when they're adults, go through emotional experiences, children's brains will automatically go to, oh, I did something wrong, this is my fault, because they think that they are the center of your universe, because they are dependents, it's normal.
Self-blame, so normal.
In that sense, which is why it's also important to, like, teach the regulation, because then it teaches them along the way, hey, actually, there's this whole other experience, it's not always to do with you. So sometimes it's just really useful, so then that, like, to teach them to ask, like, oh, are you okay? Or, hey, like, if you're mad, for example, if you're angry or at something, like, eventually they might learn and be like, hey, mum, are you mad at me, or are you just mad at something else?
Like, let's talk about it.
And then that way they like, it's this co-learning. Like, they
definitely
learn, oh, are you mad at me, or is it something else? Because you've taught them, hey, sometimes I'm mad at other things.
Yes, definitely. Or sometimes I'm just mad.
Sometimes I just have feelings.
And I'll say, no, I'm not. I'm feeling this way. And it's, through learning myself. So then, like we talked about, modeling that behavior, that they will be able to do the same. But what I'm interested in is, what was the experience? You touched on it a little bit in your life, which turned you down the career path that you're on now. So what made you become an empowerment coach and an embodiment facilitator, and so passionate about communication, owning your feelings, the awareness, the empowerment of the women, really?
It's I think a lot of it was following the nudges, but a lot of it was, when I was working in the corporate world, I liked what I did, and I've always been into communication and words and everything. Like, I grew up thinking I'd be like a journalist or something like that, right? Like,
why were you interested in words and communication?
Oh, that's a good question. I just always have been. I think it's my natural way of expressing. And maybe at times like my only way of expressing if I couldn't verbalize something, because communication has been my biggest lesson also. Like, I could write something down quite easily and, express myself in words that way. From memory, yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So, since you were little?
Yeah, I was always writing, whether I knew what I was doing, the intentionality behind it, or just, writing as a child will, which is all over the place. I always liked it, but I think the verbal expression and the emotional expression, like out loud through my mouth, speaking out loud has always been a challenge. Through learned behaviors, through, hey, is it okay to have this emotion? Oh, it's different to it makes other people feel uncomfortable, especially my elders. Oh, I might hold on to that. So that was always, and again, generationally, it's just, everyone doing the best they can with what they know. But that was what I learned. So
that was your experience. We're just talking about your experience without bagging anybody else out.
It was
You're just speaking from your
experience. It was what my brain, my still developing brain, took as truth. So that was always my biggest lesson, and it continues to be so, but there was a big lesson over my whole 20s, and there's a whole lot in there. But work wise, I think that played in, because I always I always enjoyed writing. It was just my outlet. How some people just enjoy drawing or painting or crafts. Writing was just always my thing. And I like telling stories and sharing people's experiences, and so I think that's where as a kid, journalism was the option, but I just followed my feet really, and I was working in communication. I'd studied communication and PR and everything like that, because it's about, my perspective on PR was about how do we public relations, which is how do we relate to other people, not the spin doctoring, but how do we relate to other people, and how do we bridge the gap in understanding, which is very relevant to what I do now, because I help bridge the gap in understanding some of these hippie woo-woo words, like even mindfulness, walking into the army base and talking about mindfulness. Sometimes I get surprised, but sometimes it's a word that's very
resistant.
No, that's not for us. That's for that's for the hippies. And I'm actually, this is why we talk about the nervous system with it and all of that. So
to get them on board, you have to use different language
to recontextualize and redefine the relationship that they have with that word. So that way, maybe they find their own word for it, but just to help bridge the gap in understanding what it actually means, rather than, for example, what Instagram or social media has conveyed it means. But when I was working in corporate, I had my first big experiences of anxiety there, and
let's talk about that. So generalized anxiety mostly is what you put down, but let's talk about the anxiety. You had your first experience of anxiety, or known awareness?
Probably both. It was the only time I can recall having I had maybe one or two actual anxiety attacks where I had to get up and move my body, interesting enough, because that's what I teach now. It's it's living in your body, but
like a panic attack, essentially?
Kind of, yeah. I had a lot of anxiety. It was just generalized anxiety of just existing with it. And then my therapist at the time taught me, when I'm sighing at my desk, that's an indication that my body's just asking for me to pause and breathe properly. So simple, except we don't do it.
No, we don't do it. We don't listen to our body.
No, this is me learning to listen.
Yes,
okay, so that's not the sighs aren't the feeling of anxiety yet, but they are my body speaking to me and going, hey, can you just sit up, maybe stand up, maybe go to walk outside for whatever, take a few breaths, just because something's trying to regulate. And there was one particular time I remember having a panic attack. Basically, it was just things building up on things building up, and I was in my mid-20s, so I was just, I don't know, like figuring a lot out, I think.
As we do in our 20s.
Yeah, and I just remember, like, I was really lucky, the office where I worked at, like, we were by a river, but I was sort of in an isolated section, which is probably a good thing at this stage of my life. But just because I could go through these experiences without, like, you know, eyes on me all the time, I was like, okay. I just remember going, oh my God, I need to get up and move. So, like, I stood up and I just walked outside, and I, like, just started walking along the river, like, just along the pathway there, and I was like I was a woman on a mission. Like, I was like, I just got to move.
What do you call that? And I love it. It's manic movement or something?
Yeah, but it was also just following my body, saying, I need to shift this energy because, like, it all lives in my body. So
it wasn't the manic movement at the time. It was like a listening to a direction that you were following.
I think it was probably a little bit of both, but the manicness was more because I felt like I just need to move.
Yes.
I just need to walk. Like, I just need, and really what it was is just like, I wasn't like power walking, but it wasn't probably too far off it, you know, like I was just like, I'm just walking on a mission. And because I was swinging my arms, moving my legs, breathing, it just, and I just kept walking until I felt, and I remember at the time, and this was maybe just before I started, I was doing yoga, but before I started teaching yoga, it was definitely well before I started teaching yoga actually, but I was like so aware of just deciding, you know what, I'm just going to keep walking. Like, it was a Friday afternoon, I remember, and it was quiet, and I'm like, you know what, no one's in the office. Like, I was very fortunate in this instance, but I'm like, you know what, I'm just going to keep walking, and it wasn't all that far anyway. I'm just going to keep walking until I don't have to keep walking, until my body's ready, like, you know, but while I have this feeling, I'm just going to allow myself to keep moving.
Yeah.
Because I just felt stuck, and this was a way of shifting it. And what I understand now with my training since then is because energy lives in the body and our nervous system needs to shift it and move it in our body, or not even moving it out. It's not about pushing it out the door and like, go away, get rid of it. It's just about letting it move the way it needs to move rather than holding it stuck. And in that moment, it was, I just need to move and breathe and really shift. And it wasn't really all that long. It was maybe 10 minutes one way, and then a, you know, slightly more relaxed walk back the other way, you know, and it shifted it. It just shifted the feelings, because often the feelings are just feelings. Sometimes, like, I can kind of, you know, I could probably go back and go, oh, this was, you know, what was causing the anxiety, or the catalyst rather for the anxiety. But this is the point in self-regulation, is like, we can all, there's always going to be triggers, catalysts, activations. Like, there's always going to be things, and we can't control the external.
Right. Life is like this.
Yeah, but what we can do is practice the regulation. So life, when it's like this, like you just did this big wave, right? And I actually have a really good diagram that I use for this as far as the nervous system. But instead of it being a big wave where there's peaks and valleys and, like, you know, you're like, oh,
you're up, and then you're down.
And you're all over the place. It's like there's always going to be ripples, little waves, but because you're regulating, you go, okay, I need to move. And now I have days where I'm like, or not days, but moments, you know, and that I'm like, oh, I just feel like I need to shift. I just feel like a tightness, or I feel like a heaviness, or I feel a whatever. And this is over practice and guidance, and having
and body, like practicing that body awareness,
the body wisdom, and going, oh yeah, like, instead of labeling. Oh, this happened to me the other day where I felt like a tightness in my chest and like a heaviness at the same time, and it was like I was frozen. I'm like, oh, like, and there's, you know, some anxiety about business things, you know, certain things, and I'm like, oh, okay, cool. But instead of making it mean something all the time, instead of making it mean something's wrong all the time, because sometimes it's just a feeling or an emotion that's in the body, because like I said, our neurological system isn't just the brain, it's the whole body, because it's all of our nerves, all of our whole system. Instead of making it mean, oh, something must be wrong, oh, my intuition's telling me because I feel heavy, sometimes it's just energy that needs to shift. So I put on a song that meant I was like, extending my arms out and just like moving through my body in that way.
Even I've heard singing, like you were a child.
Singing is a great way to activate the vagus nerve,
Yes.
which is really helpful for calming the nervous system too. So even when you're nauseated, because it's all related, that's related, the vagus nerve is in charge of the digestive system as well. So
see, I have heard this.
so I had a little, I had COVID at some point and it was quite mild, but the recovery was a little tough for me. So I'd have random days where I'd be like nauseated and be like, I can't stand.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm going to throw up, but it doesn't make sense because everything's fine otherwise. And there was this one day I was in the car driving down the coast. So it was an hour-long drive. And I'm like, oh, God, how am I going to... Okay, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, what's little things I can do? And I'm like, I know how to, and knowing that it's the vagus nerve is connected to the nervous system as well as the digestive system and most of our internal organs, but, it's really in charge of the digestive system.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, okay, well, I don't need to overload it either and belt out songs, but what I can do is just explore slightly deeper breaths and just, explore what that does and lengthen the breath out, but without exaggerating it.
Yeah.
And, because sometimes that can feel overwhelming.
What I feel sorry, I'm just having a giggle here because people would listen to that and then go, okay, I've got to belt out a song. I've got to put on Whitney Houston and ballads.
No,
and...
as much as I love that. Yeah. No, we just put on I think it was NSYNC or Backstreet Boys,
something
Spice
fun,
something that was just that I could just sing along to without it needing to be volume and diaphragm. It was just this knowing and it was a conscious decision because I'd learnt what I'd learnt going, oh, okay, yeah.
But what the funny thing is we'll go back to how we don't, until we start to realise and start to listen to our body and go through those lessons and that practice and everything. When I remember a distinct time when I was younger, and you don't know until you know, and you only know what you know, but your body tries to tell you those things all the time.
Oh, all the time.
Year 10, exams, stressed out, couldn't concentrate. Exams are not my finest thing. Movement is my priority. So I'm just relating to that story that you're telling about how you had to move. And I am a dancer, grown up as a dancer. So definitely movement is the priority. Going down, trying to concentrate on maths. I had an exam the next day and I was like, oh, you know what? I'm just going to stop right there. I'm going to pause it. I'm going to put some music on and I'm going to dance for 2 songs. Let it out, looking into the mirror, maybe even have the impulse bottle with...
Yeah, perfect.
As my microphone.
Yes.
And I will never forget that moment that my body told me what I needed to do as young as that with no body awareness. And so your body's always trying to tell you.
Well, if you think about it also, toddlers in the middle of a tantrum will throw themselves belly down on the ground.
Yeah. Bang
the
fist, stamp the feet.
Because by having pressure against the front of the body activates the vagus nerve, which is the calming.
Wow,
so they're just following their bodies. They're not...
We're so smart.
They're not
so
cognitively thinking, oh, I'm tantruming and I'm shitted off about this thing and so this is what I'm doing. And I'm going to do this because that'll really embarrass mum today. How good is this? They're not doing that.
They're doing something so...
They're just instinctual.
Instinctual, that's the word.
And sometimes I want to also point out too, sometimes what we need isn't to move. It depends on whether you're in a sympathetic nervous reaction, response, or a parasympathetic response. So sometimes what we don't need is to move, but sometimes we need to slow down and pause and breathe or cuddle a pillow because the nervous system...
I wanted to bring this up too because you have taught me so much and so I've been lucky enough to be on a podcast of Jessie's as well. So this is really fun for us because it's the opposite way now.
Yeah.
And I've also been fortunate enough to do your empowerment, your Boundaries 101 course.
So good.
So I've learned so much from you and this is why I wanted you on here as well to teach other mamas. But I do remember you teaching me one day, me thinking that, okay, movement is the priority for me.
Oh,
so
I
was
that.
manic moving, I reached out to you and I said, I've been doing this and I've been doing that. I went to the gym and I went for a walk and I went for a bike ride. And you actually turned to me and said, maybe try just that you flicked me your beautiful slow movement yoga. I don't know what it was called.
It was one of the I think it was one of the free ones I have on YouTube.
Yeah,
it's just a slow flow. I'm like, maybe you should just
just try this, where it was very calm, very slow. And that is what essentially shifted it.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to point that out to the listeners as well, is that it is, like you said, it's not always getting out and moving and shifting it like that, or manically, or like belting out ballads. It's also bringing it back in.
Exactly. And this is why I have different modalities, because there's never going to be the one thing that solves everything all the time.
And coming back to children, they need to work out their own regulation as well. And then so therefore we need to work out what works for us with self-regulation, what's happening right now to my body, what do I need? And then therefore we can come back and lead our children and say, okay, darling, what do you need? What are you feeling? What do you need?
Exactly. And with your example, I remember that being where I'm like, I know movement's your priority, and like, I teach different modalities. Like soul flow is like it's a free form movement, much like dance, or kind of like a static dance, but not exactly. It's a specific modality in itself.
I have to say I'm a big fan of soul flow. So yes, I'm glad we got that into the conversation too. Let's go with that.
It's it's this movement, so it's not erratic as such, but it can be, because you're just moving however your body wants you to. So you might be moving and flicking and doing all over the place, or you might be like more wavy movements and flowy movements, right? But
and sometimes you can do these absolutely ridiculous moves, but they
great,
feel
and it works.
so good.
But that could be, in comparison, for your example, in comparison to like that, maybe you just need slow, steady, intentional movements rather than just moving. And so like there's different purposes for it all, and especially as mamas, there's a lot of like I see it as a lot of the sympathetic nervous response, where it's like the manic of, if I put this down, if I slow down, if I do this, if I slow down, I don't get this done, and then everything else drops and all the plates fall and smash and the world falls to pieces. Whereas for you in that moment, in this example, it was like, you're doing all the things and I see you doing all the things, but what if you intentionally move and breathe with that slow flow that wasn't erratic, it wasn't high energy, it wasn't like energizing, which is always great sometimes, but always great sometimes.
I speak like that too, don't you?
But you know what I mean. It's useful for some people sometimes, but it was like, what if you just this slow flow that was grounding, but you're still moving, but it's very like
slow
and controlled.
And I don't do well with that.
Yeah, but you did.
But I need to. But I need to. That's the thing. I don't do well with that. And I think a lot of mums that are listening here,
because it's hard to slow down, because you think that you have to have a slow mind or slow down before you even get to the point to practice it, right? In the yoga example.
And you feel guilty for slowing down. Talking about mums here, is that I'm going to stop and I'm going to slow down for myself, and I'm going to breathe.
I'm just going to rush through this thing.
Yeah, I can't stop to do that, because my kids are my priority, and this needs to be done. And this needs to be done.
It's like, so, and it's almost like you tell yourself, well, I also need to be slowed down before I even decide to do yoga in this example, or meditate or breathe or whatever. It's like, oh no, but I need to do that first before I do that. It's like
the dishes, the laundry needs to be folded and all that kind of thing.
No, you do it by doing it.
And coming back to the earlier in the first the conversation when we started, was leading ourselves. And so if you're not leading yourself and you're not going, you know what, stuff the laundry, stuff this, and whatever else needs happening, I need to stop and do this.
And sometimes having the laundry done is going to be the thing, because it'll be like, I just feel better, cool, awesome.
Or the house is clean, I feel better for that.
But if it's in this perpetual cycle, sometimes and if you're already like in that state, and the laundry's
if you're already in that
like especially if you have like the small children that like
they're just gonna like throw it
extra laundry all the time. It's like, well, that's never gonna get done, really. That's never gonna be done. Let's call it that. It's never gonna be done, really. So
Yeah.
Maybe I need to do something different. Like I spoke about this yesterday. I did a post where I'm like, it's about sometimes it's like, yes, being a routine and having a thing is really, really great. And I'm a routine person too, or a schedule person.
Structure, yeah.
But I structure so I have enough space to flow, not so I over structure. And that's what works for me. And everyone will have a different ratio. But sometimes when we're feeling stuck, whether it's stuck in emotion, stuck in life, stuck in whatever, we just need to try something a little bit different.
Yeah.
Which is
just pivot.
Like, but yeah,
but
it's
a tiny little pivot.
It's like you know what? Instead of just coming home from the school run and getting straight into
homework or
whatever
hobbies, or
maybe we're going to
dinner.
Stop by the park.
Yeah.
On the way home.
Yeah.
Or, you know, like it could go either way. Maybe we're going to stop by the park and let the kids run around and just take some breaths of fresh air for a moment. Or maybe we'll do the shopping on the way home instead. Like, you know, so it could be functional or it could be
slowing down.
It could be like, you know, I'm just going to shift my energy by doing just a piece different and see what happens. And even in business, I find this all the time. Sometimes, like, I met up with someone for a business meeting at a cafe yesterday, and it was like, oh, this is different to my usual. Actually, I had 2 business meetings at the same cafe, you know, but it's like, oh, this is different to my usual routine on a Thursday, because normally I'd plan it and be like, oh, well, why would I leave the house until then, and la, la, la. Whereas I'm like, actually, let's just leave a bit earlier, have these really useful conversations, and then go, oh, my energy is shifted, and now I feel motivated and energized and excited again, rather than maybe in this, like in this example, maybe in the stress, rather than being in the stresses of business, I'm in the excitement of what I'm doing business for the first, like in the first place.
And that's really important too for business owners and motherhood as well.
We can translate it over to any. So like,
instead of being bogged down in what you have to do, how about we just be in this moment of the enjoyment of what we're doing?
Like, like, well, I got here and you're like, do you want a coffee, like an iced coffee? I'm like, oh, I don't normally, like, I could have been like, oh, I don't normally have more than 1 coffee a day because of blah. But I'm like, actually, that feels really nice.
I'm just going to go with it.
And it feels really nice. And it's not always saying yes. Sometimes it's saying no, but it's just recognizing where you get to shift it up a little and experience something a little bit different, especially when you're feeling stuck, that you kind of, you know, have a bit more, not even perspective, it just shifts something where you're like, oh, okay, there are possibilities. Oh, okay, cool. Now I have energy because I've done something different and I don't feel like it's same old.
Yeah. I feel like we've covered so much here. Amazing. So I'm going to ask one more question. Is there anything else that you would like to add to our conversation or focus on that's a really important message that you want to put out to this audience?
I mean, realistically, I could talk for hours or days about this, but I think it would just be the reminder to give yourself permission to, even if you've listened to this and you've gone, yeah, cool, that really resonates, and then you go into the rest of your day and totally entirely forget about it because you're like, oh, but that's not relevant to me because I'm busy and I'm all of the things that we've already spoken about. It's the reminder and giving yourself permission and not having to be perfect at it.
Yes.
I think that's the key, is like, you know, especially with communication, sometimes we hold back from communicating because we're like, I just don't know how to say it right. I just don't know. And
totally.
Like, and it's emotionally vulnerable. It still is me sometimes, but like I've learnt to recognize, you know, like there's a lot of work that's gone into it, but like it's emotionally vulnerable, especially when it's our children or our partners or our, you know, our closest ones, because we're like, but I want to get it right because, you know, I want to have, for me, I want to have the solution before I even start. It's like, well, maybe I go and say, I don't have the answer to this, but I need to just express, hey, this is what's going on. So it's letting it be imperfect and giving yourself permission. It's the 2 pieces. Letting it be imperfect in terms of the communication, and then giving yourself permission to model, even if imperfectly, but model based on what you need as well. And using that permission, like using this as a perpetual permission slip as many times as you need to just come back to each time you feel resistant, to go, oh, I shouldn't. Be like, okay, but I have permission to model, and this is an opportunity to do that for myself just as much as for my kids or for my partner even. Yeah. It is amazing how much you will experience shifts in your partner based on what you're doing for yourself too.
Yeah.
Which is a whole entire different conversation.
Yeah.
But I just needed to say that part there. So yeah, that would be the last bit.
Amazing. Thank you so much for coming on, Jessie. Really, I've really enjoyed our conversation. And like I said, we can always talk for hours.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we can go and go and go. And that's, it's always such a pleasure to catch up with you and to be able to share you with my audience. So where can the mamas or the women that are listening, where can they find you to find more about you?
Oh yeah. So I have a whole bunch of free content out there, that you can just access, obviously, on social medias. So Instagram, even LinkedIn and Facebook are all pretty active. So that's Jleigh, J-Leigh.
Yeah, we'll include the links as well.
So the Instagram handle is at j_.leigh, because that's what was available, so I'm just going with it. And I also have my podcast, which is Get Jashed. So get and then JASCHED.
Cool. And you can go over there and listen to Get Jashed on and my interview from you after you listen to this.
Yeah, we talk about leadership, communication and well-being, and I have different guests on, as well as just standalone episodes where it's just me sharing and talking about a particular topic that dives into all different aspects and all different people's experiences in those areas of leadership, communication and well-being and the impacts in their journeys. So
important, and especially at this time, this generation, so important. I love the work that you do.
Thank you.
So coming up next week will be Molly O'Callaghan, who is a women's health and women's health physiotherapist, and I'm super excited to have her on, and she's got some really passionate points on why she does what she does. So stay tuned for that. Thanks. Bye, mamas. Thanks for listening to another episode of Hey Mumma. You can find all the relevant links, including socials, in the description section of this podcast. If you want to find out more information about how I can help you build your best body after babies, then visit my website, www.thefitmummethod.com, for more info. Lastly, before you leave here today, if you've enjoyed listening, then please subscribe and share so you can help me to reach out to those mamas that also need to listen too.